Hello. Trigger warning, this video discusses eating disorder recovery, relapse and hospitalization. Please take care of yourself while watching. Have you ever felt like you're recovering, but also not really recovering? And I don't mean the messy middle of recovery, which I mentioned in my last video. The messy middle is when you're actually doing the work, eating more, challenging fears, and everything feels uncomfortable and chaotic because real change is happening. I'm talking about something different. Quasi-recovery is when things look calmer on the outside, maybe even better, but underneath that, the eating disorder is still quietly running the show. Unlike the messy middle, you aren't actively challenging it. You might feel safe, functional, and stable, but your recovery is conditional and stalled. It's that stuck in-between place where you're no longer in crisis, but you're also not really moving towards freedom. And for a long time, that's exactly where I lived. It led to relapse, more hospital admissions, and this overwhelming feeling that I just couldn't get better no matter how hard I tried. Quasi-recovery can actually be hard to spot, especially when you're still inside it. Usually it looks like some behaviours have improved. You might be eating more regularly, you might be looking healthier, you might feel more manageable again. But internally, you're still operating from eating disorder logic. You're still controlling, still clinging to rules, still negotiating with food, still measuring safety through structure and routine. The disorder hasn't disappeared, it's just adapted. And it's like having one foot in recovery and one foot still planted firmly in the illness. And this is often where people start telling themselves that while they're doing some things well, other rules don't matter as much. You might even convince yourself that you like those rules. They help you stay well, even when they're still restrictive and quietly keeping you stuck. So why is it so easy to get trapped here? Because most people don't stay in quasi-recovery down to not wanting to get better. They stay because it feels safer. You're no longer in survival mode. Other people might say you're doing well, you can function again, and that creates this subtle sense of maybe this is enough. It feels stable without truly being free, comfortable without being fully honest. And that's where the good enough trap comes in. Not because you don't care about healing, but because full recovery asks for something much harder: complete vulnerability. The biggest difference between quasi-recovery and full recovery isn't how much you eat, it's who's in control. In quasi-recovery, the eating disorder still sets conditions. It sounds like, I'll recover, but only if I keep this rule. I'll eat more, but I still need to control this part. I'll heal, but not like that. And in real recovery, the goal shifts from managing the disorder to actually letting it go. That means eating without needing to earn it, letting go of rigid structure, including the fear foods, allowing flexibility instead of constant control. And yeah, that usually feels messier than quasi-recovery, because growth is uncomfortable, uncertainty is uncomfortable, sitting with feelings instead of using behaviours to cope is uncomfortable. But coming from someone who had health obsession and still battles with the thoughts, trust me, it is healthier. That discomfort is often a sign that you're moving forward, not backwards, unlike quasi-recovery, which can feel calm but keeps you stuck. Recovery does require not restricting, not purging, not over-exercising, and not keeping your body in a deficit. Your brain literally cannot heal without nourishment. Some rules keep you physically undernourished, while others might not affect calories as much, but still make you very vulnerable to relapse. That said, it doesn't mean that everyone has to jump into everything overnight. Recovery usually happens in layers. You reduce harm, build consistency, increase intake, expand food variety, and gradually start letting go of rules. Something that I do personally is when I notice rules that I have, when I notice the little things that I'm really reluctant to let go of, I think, okay, I really need to work on letting go of those, and I try and set small goals, or I challenge those thoughts and I try to break them down to let them go. What matters isn't doing it perfectly. What matters is continuing to move forward. And a lot of people get confused because they start eating more but still feel stuck. And that's because recovery isn't only about quantity, it's also about letting go of fear foods, dropping good and bad food thinking, breaking rigid routines, and allowing spontaneity back into your life. And what you're afraid of can even change over time. Maybe at one point it was sugar, later it becomes portion rules, then timing rules, then health rules. Different packaging, same control. That's why I'm making a separate video after this one about, but I like this rule, because it's one of the biggest ways that Quasi-Recovery keeps itself alive. I'll link that in the description once it's up. But Quasi-Recovery also creates this illusion of safety. Familiar routines feel comforting, control feels stabilizing, avoiding deeper emotional work feels protective. But real safety doesn't come from rigidity. It comes from flexibility, from trust, and from knowing that you can cope without using those behaviours. When you stay in surface level improvement, it often means putting real healing on hold. And the longer that gets delayed, the harder it can feel to start moving again. If you're wondering whether you might be stuck here, it can help to gently ask yourself a few questions like, do I still negotiate my recovery? Do certain rules feel untouchable? Does the idea of full flexibility scare me more than it excites me? Do I feel better but not free? None of those makes you weak. It usually just means that the eating disorder is still trying to protect its last sense of control. But you deserve more than just coping better. You deserve quiet in your head. You deserve food freedom. You deserve a life that isn't built around managing an eating disorder. If you're in quasi-recovery right now, that doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that you've already moved far enough to see the next step. And that next step isn't more control, it's less. It's more nourishment, more flexibility, more short-term discomfort for long-term peace. In my next video, I'll unpack that but I like this rule voice, how it keeps you stuck in quasi-recovery and what to do about it. The link will be in the description of this one, and I really hope that you may have found this video helpful. I apologise for some of the repetitive parts, I noticed myself doing them as I said them, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much.